All right, hello everybody. My name is Dave Daly and welcome to the Do It Live podcast. So today on our show, we are going to have some lively discussion among student panelists about what we learned last week in autonomy. So stick around at the end. There's going to be a lot of good stuff. And also, if you like intelligent discussion about freedom, about truth, then please subscribe to the channel, either here on the left or the right. Click the button and join us, and also hit that little alarm bell, so you can get notified when we get new videos, so you can participate. All right, so on today's show, we're gonna do 4 things. We've got some students here, and we're gonna share our experience of autonomy over the last week, what we've experienced. But first, there is some breaking news. Okay, you guys ready for this? In the UK, where Jonathan lives, a 99-year-old man just became the first one to die of old age in an entire year. Okay, since 2020. It's ridiculous news. Just thought we should be aware of that. And also, in other news, we've got Corbett Report. How many of you have heard about the Corbett Report? Just happened. Something just happened with them. And I'm having a hard time getting this to shrink down. But anyway, we'll play this anyway.
James Corbett.
All right. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I shared a little bit of that breaking news with you guys today. So on to the next segment here. So we're going to jump into picks from the past. This is a couple of snippets from last week's calendar items. So every week in Autonomy, one of the nice things about Autonomy is we don't just have a nice lecture from Richard Grove on Fridays. We also have lots of classes that are hosted by students during the week and other people. So what I wanted to do is just pick a couple and highlight those for you. And let's go ahead and jump over into that real quick here. So this is my picks from the past week.
This is a course that I'm titling Regenerative Agency, and it is a overarching compendium of the last 3 years of my interest and involvement in microorganisms. As such, I had been told of just agricultural practices and different means of cultivating healthy cultures and the importance of having healthy cultures. And there was one person in particular that talked so much story with me that I eventually began to see from the level of microorganism up. And that really helped to understand a lot of the ecological, biological systems that are currently in place and their interactions. And I just thought it was so fascinating how much, we're taught about plants, how much we're taught about animals, how much we're taught about agriculture. Not that we're taught all that much to begin with, but that microorganisms are so rarely discussed, really. And it's even common in agriculture to think in terms of phosphorus and nutrients, and you add this material or this mineral and you're talking about what your soil has available. but it's so rarely touched on that it's actually dependent on microorganisms to make those nutrients available in plant form.
All right, that was Justin Olson. This is Lisa.
So a strategy requires consideration and execution of all of the parts. So we've laid out the groundwork for how the institutions and the people who are making money are doing it. And we're now privy to the tools and strategy to implement them in our own lives. So we have this great plan and we take advantage of all the benefits in our lives. We're growing our knowledge and our assets. But have we thought about what happens after that? So if you have families, businesses, or you just don't want your money going to the state, listen good.
All right, so those are my 2 picks from the past. That was Justin Olson and Lisa and Freddie, who teach some classes. Anyone get a chance to jump into either of those classes this last week and share some thoughts on it? Anybody? Yeah, Mark? You can unmute yourself. Yeah, no? Able to tap that unmute button. I wish I could unmute you myself here. That's very weird how it just wants me to. There you go. You got it.
Yeah, I didn't really have a whole lot to say other than I was there.
You were there. Which one did you take?
The estate planning. So there was some new stuff there, and still steeping in that. Yeah.
Still soaking it in?
Yeah.
And what's one thing that you thought was sort of useful?
It was really choppy there.
Yeah, I was just asking, can you recall like one thing, one tidbit that you thought was really kind of useful that you took one takeaway?
The notes that I wrote on that, I don't have in my car. So
okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, Mark. No, I appreciate you chiming in, but you enjoyed the class.
Yeah, I did.
Got it useful.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So I mean, just the idea that, we can learn about agriculture, we can learn about food, we can learn about estate planning, all of these things that are associated with autonomy, right? Very useful courses that you can look into. All right, so let's jump back here. Now we're gonna talk about something. Now, every week we get assignments or exercises that we can try on for size. And for the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've been inside interviews. We've been doing interviewing with our fellow classmates, learning how to listen actively. We got this exercise 2 weeks ago. It seems simple, seems pretty straightforward, right? Just have a conversation, listen to someone. But it can be tricky, right? Sometimes you want to interject rather than listen. So this is a very important skill that can be used in many, many environments, right? Whether that's sales or job interviews or, just talking with a friend. So let's get, 2 or 3 of you. I mean, I know a lot of you this week have done some of these conversations, right? And we've been getting better at them from week to week. Does anybody have any experiences from this last week or 2 that you'd like to share with the audience on some of the things maybe you've learned about this process?
Hey, Dave. It's Amanda.
Hey, Amanda.
Hey, I just wanted to go back because I didn't get my chance to say, but I took both. I was in on for both of those, Justin and Lisa's course. I've been watching Lisa since the very beginning. And I mean, I'm always just blown away every time about the information that we just don't get outside of, in terms of how to manage finances and stuff like that. So, I mean, her course is always great. She had a lawyer on this week and she talked about trusts and wills and like really planning for your future, because I think a lot of us get stuck in the day-to-day and how to manage our money on a daily basis. And we don't necessarily think about future planning, which the wealthiest people on this planet do, right?
Right.
So it's cool to kind of like get an inside track on that and some knowledge on that you're not really given. And I really love Justin's course too. If none of you got to check it out, it's a little bit technical, but the things that he's researching in terms of microbiology could really be a huge savior for a lot of the farming and agriculture industry on this planet. And not just that, I mean, there's so many things that what he is into can fix, even in terms of like water quality and nutritional and in a nutritional sense in terms of farming and eliminating a lot of pesticides. So I learned a ton, and I'm really, every week I get more blown away at how much knowledge that we all have together. And it's just really cool to be in a community where we get to share all that stuff and kind of piece together all these little things that separate us more and more from the system and having to depend on the outside, you know, to kind of help us along, just be a little more autonomous and independent in that sense. So I
Cool.
loved it. It was
Thanks
really
for
cool.
sharing that, Amanda. So have you started your home garden yet? Do you guys have land that you're going to be?
We have land. I'm starting some seedlings right now. We're not up there full time yet, so we don't have a huge garden yet, but it's in the
Right.
works.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
was talking to
definitely,
TJ earlier this week. You guys have some property up there in Florida.
yeah. So I'm starting my little baby seedlings. I started some corn and some beans, and some cantaloupe recently. So
Right.
we just got to get up there more.
Cool. Well,
But
you're ahead of the game. You're ahead of me, for sure. I bought a big microgreen setup that I have in boxes downstairs. That's my backup plan, so I can grow stuff indoors. So I mean, I'm not completely behind, but I still haven't like cracked everything out of the box. It's just sort of a prepper plan. You got to learn how to do the growing. It's very cool.
And it's really neat. It's not just something that can help us be more autonomous in terms of like growing our own food and progressing that way, but it's something that can really help restore a lot of life on the planet.
That regenerative aspect, right?
Yeah. So if you guys haven't checked out what he's doing, it's really, really neat.
And this was his first class, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is brand new stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, I know he'd probably love a lot of you to join and give him feedback and stuff, because he's sort of piecing together. And that's another great thing about this community. Like, that's what we're here for, right? You're kind of putting the pieces together, and we all appreciate and value each other's input. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's what
Thanks for that, Amanda.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Sorry for jumping ahead, guys. Anyone else have any comments on that course? Did anyone else take any of those classes before we move forward to the interviews? Because we definitely want to make sure Lisa. Yeah, go for it.
I had not participated in those. I was trying to get into Lisa. She's the one who did my call. Sorry, I'm in the car driving, so I'm not
no worries. We can hear you.
to participate. But I have studied and practiced, but not gotten a certification for permaculture over the past 8 years. So I understand a lot about like growing food forests and things that continue for generations and restore land and agriculture. And I actually have a lot, like tons of like documentaries and research and stuff like that I would love to share, because like that's been my passion for a while.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like got put on the back burner, but I don't have anywhere now. I'm actually like just getting back on my feet, and this is, you know, a way to like help me in that process. So but yeah, I'm on week 2 right now. I'm trying to finish the thing and then start my interviews hopefully this week. And yeah, I've been trying to attend all the live everything and like hear everybody, but yeah, so I haven't participated as much, but I'm almost caught up. So
yeah, well, don't break your neck. You know, it's a lot of material, so take your time and, you know, get on it as you can. So yeah, you should definitely reach out to Justin for sure, since you guys have a lot in common. You know, and talking.
And what he was saying about microbes and also like mushrooms, and they facilitate a lot of the transport of those nutrients. And permaculture is all about, you know, doing it organically and using like polycultures. And this plant, you know, produces nitrogen that feeds this plant, which is also, you know, a Native American technique with the corn and the beans and the squash. So, you know, the corn needs a lot of nitrogen, and legumes produce nitrogen in the soil through a microbiome or a symbiotic relationship with mushrooms on their roots. So it's like a really cool thing that he's studying that I know a little bit about, but I would love to get into this.
Yeah, definitely super fascinating, super important for sure. Cool. Anyone else?
It's sustainable too, right? Like the way that big agriculture works
Yeah,
now, it's not sustainable. It's not going to sustain us doing the things the way we do them. So I am a very big fan of anyone in your field. So thank you for what you do. And yeah, you guys should definitely connect.
Not to mention that a lot of these factory farms, they're all about the profit. And so they're siphoning the nutrition right out of the food, right? Just to get it out as much of the commodity as you can. Whereas when you grow things in good soil, you add those minerals and extra, you use the organic farming and regenerative techniques, you get higher nutrition, higher quality food.
And we're talking about energetic aspects and the light. You're trying to eat the light, basically. The further away down the food chain you are from where the sun is coming in and getting the light, you get it from plants, or you're eating the animals that ate those plants that got the light. So, I mean, and, the way that they're treating the animals is horrible. So I've also kind of developed something called cooperative veganism, which is where I had goats that could produce milk, and my chickens laid an egg every day. No roosters involved. Nobody got hurt. Everybody's outside living a happy life. They're basically my pets. And so, yeah, that's something else that I might like to get out there and share.
That's great. All right, so let me jump back to the screen share here. Actually, well, since we're on the interviews, I'll just leave that off for now. Let's talk about the interviews. Who here did some interviews this week? Wants to share some of the feedback with us on how that's going, what you're learning, how you're growing, what was challenging about the experience. Tell us all the good stuff.
Hey, Dave, how's it going?
What's up, Gary?
Good. I really love the interviews. I'm turning into a better listener. In fact, I could go back to every name now, and I can't remember all the people I've talked to. I'd have to look at my list. But the thing I have noticed is the retention level I have, and paying attention better, and being a better listener. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I catch myself, I'm wandering. Somebody will say something and I'll go off, maybe I'm duking it out with a politician or something, but I come back, yeah, well, that's me.
Did you find yourself fighting your urge to talk when you were trying to listen, or how did you?
Yes, I did. I said, time for me to shut up. Now you talk. And I do.
Is it getting easier and easier with every interview?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. In fact, I've come to a point where I'd rather listen to them talk rather than me talk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it is great for once upon a time egomaniac.
Well, I only bring it up because that was this early struggle that I had doing this, was that I'm a talker. I like to talk, and I would usually just talk over people. So now I'm trying my best to slow it down and listen. Yeah, so that's why.
What's great about this group though, Dave? We're all like-minded people.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to argue.
Very little arguing going on.
I know. If this was me and this other group that I'm in outside of Autonomy, I have to censor myself.
Just give it some time, Gary. We'll figure out our differences in time.
Well, hopefully this week, because we got to debate each other. So,
that's right. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm glad you're bringing that up. We're going to be talking about that in a minute.
This is did I fall asleep during that lecture last night? What time was that at?
It was at the very end. I think you just missed it. Yeah.
I did miss it. I haven't had time. I've been in meetings and other meetings and interviews. And so, okay. So where do I find out about debating?
Well, okay. Well, let me just share my screen real quick again, and then we'll pop back, because maybe we'll go ahead and segue to this other section down here at the bottom, because Jeffrey is going to talk to us a little bit. So this was one of the most recent integration exercises where you're going to be choosing a subject that you're passionate about. So maybe it's regenerative, gardening, or maybe it's, estate planning, or whatever you're interested in. Then you're going to be formulating an argument in support of that subject, present it to another student in a boardroom. I'm not sure what we mean by that. Is that just like a dojo room? Similar to the last exercise. Yeah. And then when you're done, you'll schedule a follow-up appointment with that student. And at the follow-up, that's when the student's going to respond to your argument. Feel free to repeat, do variations, different subjects. You can talk about anything. that you're comfortable with, and be excellent to each other. So that's
look at this. This is not going to go. Most courses will shy away from free to discuss what you like. Let me get you out of the way so I can finish reading.
Can I just jump in for a second?
Yeah, go ahead, Joanna.
So I'm sorry, is that not the extra integration exercise, or is that the current integration exercise?
Is that the extra or the current, guys? That's what I recall.
I think it has to be the extra.
That one was actually put in that last week's integration exercises as like that was kind of like an extra.
Yeah, it was an adjunct,
we were supposed
to last week, but this week,
so we were supposed to continue on with the regular integration exercise of the interviews like last week, and then if we wanted to, we could add in the debates or whatever. But that was part of last week's integration exercise. But Richard kind of just put that more on the surface as like something to focus more on this time.
But was that what you were talking about, Amanda? That's the one, no?
Yep. So it's supposed to be kind of our next step now.
Oh, I didn't.
Not so much extra anymore as our next path.
I didn't see that. I mean, I don't want to do it. So. I want to just Claire. I'll just have to go look in Kajabi because I don't think it's like a requirement or whatever.
Oh, it's not a requirement, but yeah, it's definitely a requirement you can do. Yeah.
I think it would help me with sales. I think it would,
What this looks like is what we did in my high school with debate team. The only difference is that you both would agree on the subject and take opposite sides, so that you might even take a side you didn't believe in, but study it thoroughly enough to speak on the subject.
Right. So you can do it politely and just talk about the different aspects that you agree on and that you disagree on. And it'd be interesting to see where the new synthesis, right? You have that dialectic.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of the point, right? Is like being able to have a conversation about something you might disagree on, but being civil, right? Staying excellent to each other. Yeah. I mean, and by doing that, you're going to be able to see the other person's points as if you don't listen to them, then you might not ever know what their point is. They might actually have something to say that might divert your train of thought towards that particular subject. But if you can't sit down and debate and have a civil conversation, then you're never going to know. And that's kind of like what we were talking about with Richard in the Q&A, right? So
very important. So it's like thesis, antithesis, and equals the new synthesis, right? That's the Hegelian dialectic. So you throw out your thesis to the person, they're going to throw back their antithesis, and then at the end of the process, you're going to come out with a new, hopefully, maybe with a new synthesis. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.
Or maybe one side is correct.
Right.
Yeah, it is. And I find it to be a continuation of the last week's exercises, because we were questioning each other about our current status quo. So I find this revealing of underlying truths has happened this week or the past 2 weeks. So this is just a continuation, isn't it?
It is.
Right. And if your argument isn't about your ego, it's okay.
I'd like to put an antithesis to that thesis, actually.
All right, let's hear it.
So I'd say that this is no longer just a continuation. This is a step change. Why does Jonathan think this is a step change? Well, I'm going back to John Taylor Gasso's 5 hours of underground history of education in the United States. And what the elite private schooling does is allow people, enable and encourage them to start to talk about any topic that they want, and they would be able to produce easily 300 words. So I'm not going to know Dave's topic that we're going to talk on, or Gary's or Adrian's, but I'm now expected to come up with an antithesis to their thesis. So I'm being driven now to actually not just take your saying at face value. I now have to develop that intellectual self-defense that's going to find the contradictions in something that's going to be probably a very well put together argument, because you chose it and you know it better than I. So now we're starting to actually go beyond the simple part of, let's talk about many of those topics that we agree on. And actually, most of us would agree that we don't want the government to have our money. We want to keep it. We've got probably freedom orientated politics and the like. So we might agree. So it's really interesting that we're going to get these new topics to be able to do. And the other part that we're going to start to be challenged into is to maintain that civility that you said, Dave, where we're going to have to execute that non-violent conversation so we can still be as charming to each other and like each other as we built this community.
Well
I
said,
agree,
Jonathan. Well said. I really appreciate that. And that's what it's all about, right? We need to be able to create that intellectual self-defense, as you put it, that only comes from getting in the dojo and doing the exercises, right? Going through the routines. And then as we do that, we're going to gain that strength as we do it. Now we have a little bit of a treat. We can come back to this discussion, but Jeffrey, who's on the line with us, said that he already had begun to do this exercise and volunteered earlier to give us a little insight on how that went for him. Jeffrey, you still there and available?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Why don't you fill us in on your experience?
Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting experience for me because I put it out there. I still have not set up a Calendly link because of our family structure and busyness level. We haven't decided on the best times for me to be available. So I just put it out, and it happened to work out that there was an opportunity on Tuesday. So I put it out in the course classroom chat that I was going to do a presentation on the principles of nature farming. And a couple people showed interest, and not long after that, Joshua put it on, or suggested putting it on the class calendar. So I got a little overwhelmed, like, whoa, what did I just get myself into?
Right.
But it was good because I had not been available to host the podcast for a long time. So I was really excited to do something soon. And then I had a whole bunch of technical difficulties. I tried to switch our internet from wireless to wired and knocked out the connection. So I wasn't able to use my computer. I had to just go on the notebook and on the phone as a just presentation with no visuals, no, just like me talking. So it was kind of a frustration for, right before it happened. I had one of those things to go through. And then I had to reorient myself and just talk and work with the little bit of notes that I had handwritten down. And so I was trying to argue for nature farming, or it's like, which I consider to be well beyond organic farming. It's in a similar realm of everything that Justin's talking about. It's got.
Can you give us a quick synopsis on it? What is it?
The three main bullet points are little to no petroleum, little to no imported fertilizers, or really imported of anything at the height of it, at like the most the full expression of it, like zero inputs from imports. Yeah, like everything coming from your land, and then also no commercial or industrialized pesticides, even if they would be quote unquote organic, but it comes from working with plants and using all of their medicine and properties to be able to manage pests. And that kind of ties into the ideas of herbalism versus petroleum-based pharmaceuticals, where the petroleum-based pharmaceuticals often are just an extricative of this like one particular compound of a plant, and the herbs have those plants in them. The whole plants have those compounds in them, but they also have other compounds to balance out, and that's why often herbs don't have any negative side effects in the same way that pharmaceuticals do.
Right. Very cool. So how did it go over with the, have you had a chance to get feedback from the person?
I did. Justin was there, Dana and Mark was there. And again, like I said, I haven't really had an opportunity to set up my own times for Calendly. So I have yet to reach back out to them to see about an integration exercise and hopefully interview, and then we can talk about that. But I would say from my own observations, I kind of gave this overview of it, but I kind of forgot to talk about I touched on the negatives of industrial agriculture, but I didn't really compare and contrast the two to the full extent that I would have liked to, and can now see how to structure that. So it gave me a lot of information on how to structure my presentation moving forward.
Now you're already pretty familiar with this area, right? Would you consider yourself an expert in this space? Or?
I'm still learning, but I've been doing it for, I've been, on the organic farming path for about 10 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a while. So how long would you say it would take, because we're, to prepare this kind of, an argument, how much time did you invest in getting ready to make your presentation, or did you kind of do, ad hoc, off the cuff kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly had all this information internalized from a lot of studying, and I put a couple of hours into getting specific quotes and specific diagrams ready to show, and that was really my first time doing an online presentation. I've kind of been anti-technology for the last 8 years or so, until like a year and a half ago. I still had like the slider dumb phone with the keypad on it. So that's all been pretty new to me. So it was a struggle to figure out how to organize those. I definitely reached out to a couple people for guidance on maybe how to do some of that stuff, and researched that and started researching my source materials and putting that together. I put a couple hours in, but I could have put a lot more.
Yeah, so for someone who's got some expertise in the area, you still put in a couple of hours. So this exercise could take up some time if you really want to do it right.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also been a really good learning experience because of the idea of developing a more full course on these topics, and how to grow all the food for 50 people in your community, and how to utilize these plants and be able to research which plants are going to work in different micro regions of the globe. So there's just so much to put into it, and it really started me down the path of developing that content. Through the process, I came up with a name for my program and my podcast site, and yeah, it's been really great.
Cool. What's your podcast site? Can you give us an address?
Yeah, I haven't built any of that yet, so
working on it. Gotcha.
but it's going to be called The Road Back to Nature.
Nice.
Which is an homage to one of the Japanese farmers' books on philosophy that I would say is probably my ultimate inspiration.
Right. And what's your actual handle that you use? Means what? It means farmer? Farmer?
It means nature farmer.
Yeah. And that's how do you pronounce it? Shizan?
It's, from my understanding, it's Shizen Noho, but I have no Japanese language. That was playing telephone with a guy who takes karate lessons from a Japanese.
Right. Okay, she's on Noho, something like that, and that means nature farmer. Super cool. Does anybody have any questions for Jeffrey about his process, or any curiosity about that?
I just think it was a brilliant strategy to kind of hold back some of your argument sandbags. So when they came back at you, you're like, oh yeah, well, I still have this. I'm just kidding. But I do applaud you for getting out there right away and setting an example for the rest of us, because these kinds of things are difficult. It's one thing to get into an interview and work off a set of questions and or just answer things about yourself, which you know. It's another thing to present this argument, to prepare it, and then to get ready to receive criticism. So I just want to give you kudos.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mike. Yeah,
can we,
go ahead.
Can we watch this anywhere?
Say again?
Was that recorded?
I did not record it. There's another mistake and failure that I learned, that from the stress of the technological things, that we got into a little bit of chatting right before, and then I totally spaced out on pushing the record button.
Right. Yeah. You were using Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. I just came in late, but everything you said was highly interesting. I'm interested in all the same stuff too. So I'd be interested in talking more about any of that stuff.
Yeah, hopefully we get a chance to hear the both sides of that argument at some point. Maybe when you do get a chance to talk to the people who've heard your argument, maybe we can record it then, because that would be awesome. So I'm getting the picture here that this could be a nice, challenging opportunity to grow and learn from. I can already see that I'm going to have to block some time if I'm going to do this exercise, right? So cool. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for giving us that insight into what you went
Absolutely.
through. Appreciate
I do
it.
want to say one last thing, and
Yeah,
that the whole thing, I was a little bit self-conscious and did not have the confidence going into all of this, and it was pretty serious step for me. And it I talked to another Autonomy season 1 student, Chris McMillan, and I know Richard had mentioned how Chris like reached straight out to his #1 list and got an interview with Corbett lined up. And after this, next day I was reading a new article by my #1 interview slot, and I got up the gumption to reach out to this guy who's an elder in the herbalist community, very rarely does interviews, and I landed an interview with him to be the flagship episode of the podcast. So I'm pretty.
Oh man, that's super cool. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a big deal. So is this guy like he's an influencer in the space?
Yeah, he's definitely he's a barbaric herbalist, earth poet, incredible author, incredible thinker, and he also has written 2 of the most deep ideals of herbal antibiotics and herbal antivirals from he says, one of his quotes in the intro to one of those 2 books is, we as herbalists who want to be actually in communion with the earth, we can't really just eat organic today and when some crazy shit happens, go to the doctor, but we actually need to be prepared to deal with certain real aspects of life if that situation were not to be there.
Cool.
Awesome. I think I know.
Go ahead, Carl. Go ahead.
I think I know who that is. I don't know if I should spill the beans if you're waiting to. Can I say who I think?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Is it Stephen Buhner?
Yeah, yes.
Nice.
That was my guess as well. He is my literal hero. But I would also like to collaborate with you. I'm getting my Calendly set up possibly to discuss how what you have been researching intersects with what I have been researching for a long time, because it sounds very similar, but by a different name. So yeah, I look forward to sending you and talking to you further.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Sweet. All right, so we heard from Gary on the interviews this week. We heard from Jeffrey on the extra exercise. Does anyone else want to talk about their experience this last week with the interviews?
I'll speak on it real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, the interviews. The format was pretty similar as last week we kept too, but I had some good interviews with some really good people, yourself included. But I will say, I had an interview with Mike, which everybody just saw a moment ago, and like he got me like wicked deep into my personal stuff. He's a good guy to interview, guys. If you guys want to schedule something up with Mike, because he asked me some really good solid questions, and he dug up some stuff that I didn't expect to talk about, but it was cool to I felt comfortable talking to him about certain things that I didn't expect to. So it was really cool. Yeah, all these interviews are really great. It really just pulls out a lot of stuff that I think is inside all of us, right? But we don't really see it. So when we have these conversations, and it's interesting because each individual person has a different personality and is coming from a different place, even though the questions are the same. I mean, it still fascinates me how everything, or how stuff gets dug up every time. Like every interview, it seems like I end up talking about something I didn't expect to talk about, or an idea, because I think I touched on this last week. It's like when you're being asked that big question, the whole interview process is like, what are you going to do about it? Is really just I think is like one of the biggest key things, is like, because it really makes you think. It really digs up some stuff and helps you kind of map out or consider the next steps in your blueprint. For your own personal experience. So
have you had any aha experiences? Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want you to go back to TJ, but everything that was great about that interview was TJ. He has an amazing story. And sometimes, you just have to move away from the script or ask a question a couple times. But, you know, I encourage people to interview TJ because I was really inspired by his story and I don't want to give it away. You just got to set it up.
Yeah, I was honored to interview TJ too the other day. He does have a really amazing story. He's gone pretty far over a very short period of time, very courageously. I mean, a lot of people struggle to level up and take on new skills and new opportunities as fast as TJ has really recently. So yeah, I recommend, just like Mike says, anyone to get his Calendly link. Where do we get your Calendly link, TJ?
I'll pop it in chat again.
Pop it in the chat.
Sure.
You're going to
I'll pop it in chat. But yeah, I appreciate the kind words, guys. But yeah, I mean, I think we all have a great story to come, right? That's why we're all here. So I think these collaborations and these integration exercises in this community, even though I've had an interesting story, and it's funny because Mike's like, man, your story is so interesting. He's like, it's almost like you're bragging about it. And I was like, man, that's so funny you say that. I was like, because sometimes when I do tell my story, I actually feel like I'm bragging about it, but it's just my story. But the way it unfolds, it makes me feel, it does feel like that sometimes. So it's interesting. But I think we all have a story to write, right? So it's going to be interesting, and I look forward to getting through Autonomy with all you awesome people, and not just seeing where my story goes, but seeing where all of our stories go together.
Awesome. Thanks, TJ. I was asking TJ, and TJ, you can respond to this, but has anyone had any like aha experiences? Like when you're doing this, I noted this on the last call when TJ was hosting, you know, I kind of felt like doing the interviews was a semi-spiritual experience, just because I'm overriding my typical talk over everybody type behavior and trying to listen and listen and listen. And just doing that, it was very meditative, right? And so my own personal aha experience was just, you know, that I can listen, you know, that I can, and also, you know, instead of just talk. But has anyone had a specific, you know, aha moment where like, wow, I didn't know this about myself, or I didn't know this about the process? Does that resonate with anybody?
I like the aha moments that a chap by the name of Nick Hayes gave me, and it was such a simple one that it was striking in that way that you put it so well, Dave. Aha. And it came about because I cocked up this week, and as I said and went back to the cause of it, Nick just said those great simple words. It's like, well, what does good look like? And for me, that was really just starting, well, okay, what's a good morning routine for me? Well, a good morning routine is then set up by a good going to bed routine, and just making sure that culture of excellence is permeating everything. You know, what really does make me get up in the morning? Well, yeah, if the exercise gear is there, I've got enough time to be able to make my coffee, check the calendar for appointments and the like before the day starts. That was really an aha moment for me. And Nick's in Bristol in England, so the time zones might be out, but he's also another guy I would really highly recommend everybody make an appointment with.
Very cool. Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Appreciate that feedback. Anyone else? All right, so let's.
Well, actually, Dave, since I'm yabbering on, I might be able to say one of the great things I've enjoyed about continuing on the interviews is actually seeing everybody who I have interviewed with has become more practiced, and I can tell that the interviews are just increasing in their goodness and their value for me, for the questions that everybody has asked, the own knowing of themselves. So for me, as I have had to tell my story in the interviews, it's sharpened me, the iron sharpening iron. I've been able to know myself better, which goes back to Gary's point, and I did have a great interview with Gary, which I really enjoyed as well. I now know myself better, and I'm now much more willing to shut up and let the other person talk and find out more about them. I know enough about me now. I'm still finding little bits more, but there's much more value in interviewing you good people.
Awesome. That's great feedback. So yeah, it kind of goes to that thing that we learned in the lecture last week about the 20 hours, right? Being able to become an expert, or at least better at something, you know, competent at a skill like listening, in a very short period of time. We've sharpened our axes. We've become better at this skill just in 2 or 3 weeks, just by having a small handful of conversations. Just goes to show that we can grow fairly rapidly if we put in a small amount of effort and do that. So cool. Awesome. So let's just shift gears real quick. And I wanted to take a look at some of the interesting things that were shared in the Discord. So we've gone sort of from, we've talked about picks from the past, inside the interviews. Now let's just take a quick look at Tales of Discord. Now what this is where, while we're watching the lecture on Friday night, Richard Grove gives us an awesome lecture that we invite you to participate in. Check out Autonomy at getautonomy.info if you're interested in checking out the course. But during the lecture, a lot of people shared different things. And so I wanted to share some of the things that people were sharing during the lecture. And here's some of the artwork that was shared. These are some of the thoughts that people have. Is the person who created this on board with us right now or not? And if not, can anyone relate to from what this might have been about from our lecture last night? What was our lecture about primarily? Failure, right? Giving up. So this was one of the pieces that was put up on the Discord, sort of with regard to that, right? You're just about there, almost to getting the result, and then you turn around and give up there right at the end, right? Let's see, what else did we have? This was some artwork by Woody that he produced for us during the discussion. Learning, we have ignorance and problems. So ignorance is the opposite of fear, right? Learning is how we get away from fear. All right, and then I don't know exactly how this applied, but this was a really nice, I can't remember who posted this up on the Discord, but this was some really cool music. I thought I would share some of it here. I think that was it. That was the key line, right? Nothing's ever going to take me down. So, all right, next one. I don't remember who produced this, but this was a cool t-shirt piece of art that was produced by one of the students in the discussion. Autonomy equals freedom, attain, maintain, retain. Really cool. Who created this? Do we have the creator of this artwork with us today? Nope, yes, no, maybe. All right. Couple other things. So some of the things that we learned about during the lecture this last week, we were talking a little bit about, different ways that we face challenges and fears. And one of the things that was brought up was this concept of the Pythagorean cup, which I had never heard of before. Anybody who had heard of this before? Because I hadn't. Yeah. So I dug up, someone posted this video. So this is just the Wikipedia article on that. And this kind of covers it in an interesting way. So I thought I would share that.
One of my co-workers went to a conference in Greece and came back with a present of something which is very old, from 400 years BC or even earlier, but I never seen before. It's called the Pythagoras cup, and it has this strange bit sticking up in the middle. And the story is that this cup was invented by Pythagoras, the one that worked on right-angled triangles. He invented it so when he gave his students wine, they all got the same amount. And if somebody was greedy, that student got his comeuppance. It behaves normally until you get to this gold ring here, the one I'm running my finger around, not the one up here. And if you fill it above that, that's somewhere between these two, suddenly all the liquid in the glass drains out and through a hole in the bottom. Of course, you can't see what's happening here, so I rushed off and bought a glass one so you can see what's happening. I asked Neil to demonstrate it. You pour in the water, imagine it's wine, but if it was wine, you couldn't see inside. And as the level of the wine rises, suddenly, if you're too greedy, it all dribbles out. And it siphons out through the little tube in the center. The way it works is that inside here there is a U-tube which has a small opening at the bottom, and as the liquid rises, the U-tube fills up, and when it gets to the top, it siphons round and sucks the water out. I was really excited about this, and then when I was driving home, I wondered what would happen if you filled it with mercury. Mercury is a very dense liquid. So I persuaded Neil to fill it with mercury, and it works just as well with mercury.
All right, cool. So I thought I'd share that with you. Do you guys, so this was part of the discussion that I think went a little bit over my head, right? And I think it was with regard to this concept of siphoning pressure from different areas. Does anyone want to speak to this that has a better understanding of this lesson and how we can apply it to ourselves and, you know, achieving success and defeating failure? Anybody have any ideas on that from the lecture?
Yes, I knew about Pythagoras's cup a long time ago. The idea is there is a certain amount that you can take in, and if you take the right amount, you can always have some coming in. It is a perpetual, it is actually somewhat perpetual if you can keep the top filling. So as you get things filled in, as it gets to the right level, you will be able to produce without like sucking on a straw. The difference between sucking on a straw and this is it pours out. You're not sucking it up. So the idea is that you have to have enough input to get something moving and going and out.
But that's so it's like the input is the taking in of the information, right? But then there's also there was something else about the action principle, right? Taking action on it. How does that sort of
that you have to get it to a certain height. So you can do that in two ways. You can lower the siphon. That is to say, you know, lower the level where it gets.
Make this part a little shorter.
Yeah, make that part a little shorter. Or you could make it a little narrower or more focused.
Okay. So how do we apply that to us? So we
how do you
narrow
apply
our
that
focus.
To a person? Your focus will get the level of your knowledge or whatever you're trying to produce higher, quicker.
Right.
Right. And if you're able to lower that other one, but still maintain the siphon, that's the big thing. You got to maintain that siphon thing. You can do that by, you can either get more inputs, you can narrow it by your focus, or you can change kind of the geometry of the cup if you need to try to get that there. And what that means is if you're getting a bunch of stuff in, you have to have some place for it to go. Otherwise, you're wasting all that's coming in.
Kind of comes back to the listening idea, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, not only listening, but there's an active part of not just listening, but focusing on what knowledge really is. We live in a complete entertainment system.
It's information, not necessarily knowledge.
well, not even information. It's just passive receiving of. This goes back to another analogy of Plato's wall. Yeah, it isn't even, most of it isn't even real. Most of it is just pictures that kind of keep our eyes fixed on it. It doesn't add anything to it. So part of it, you have to go out at this point, you have to go out and find material. Just like, I don't know if he played that clip yesterday. I didn't get to go through the whole thing that way, but there are other clips. Yeah, there are other clips on things like this, and there are other analogies as well with holding on to things. Sometimes if you hold on to them for too long or too tightly, they dribble out. Sometimes they, there's all these analogies about how you capture and how you give out. And this one makes it so that you're not constantly under pressure to output something, but that naturally your output is going to come because of your focus and because of your intaking, whatever that happens to be.
Cool. That's very elucidating. I appreciate that. Anybody else have any thoughts on the Pythagorean cup or the section of the lecture that this was on about? No. DJ?
No, I was just going to say thanks for that, Adrian, because that was a great breakdown. Like I didn't, yeah. So
yeah, it went a little bit over my head too. That actually helped.
Yeah, no, it helped me a lot. I was just telling Amanda, I was like, yeah, Adrian's smart. Like, but yeah, that was great. I really appreciate that. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, we need all our philosophy masters for this one. All right, cool.
Can I just give a plug for the lecture overall, even though I haven't finished it yet? But I can already tell from the time that I put in it, it's a menagerie of mental models. Anybody who's an autonomy student needs to print out the slides and go over that material 5, 6, 7 times. And if you're not an autonomy student, last night's lecture, from what I've heard so far, and the opportunity to interview autonomy students are more than worth the cost of admission. I was super impressed with what I've heard, and it is exactly the kind of thing I look for. It's taking principles in other disciplines and applying them in a way that you don't normally come across. So if it's taking a scientific law and then applying it to a personal practice or a business practice, because some of these concepts have multiple applications. And I've only heard not even half of it yet, but I've already been blown away by it. So, great job on the lecture last night. Really impressed.
Yeah, it's definitely a feast of information. It's a lot to go through. And one of the good things about autonomy is that when you do sign up for autonomy, you are in it for life, right? So you can come back around and hear these lectures again and again and get this information, deeper in. All right, so just real quick, couple of more things that I wanted to share. So there was this one aspect, right, about, there was a slide. Let me jump back here to the slides here. It's a great slide. If I can bring it up here, this one right here about, this was part of the lecture talking about momentum. Okay, and this kind of goes a little bit, I think this is why I was asking about the, the action taking component, right? Because that's the momentum that you get going, and momentum itself is a resistance to resistance, which that was one of the things that caught my attention last night. That was a really fascinating idea. And Richard used this analogy of, this idea of the wheel, that when you get the centrifugal and centripetal forces going with momentum, that momentum is going to resist any kind of change. And so I found this video on that topic, and thought I would share a little bit of this right here. Chuck, let me just back it up a smidge, because here he is speeding the wheel up, getting some momentum going. Got the wheel moving.
There it goes. About 10 seconds. Isn't that amazing? and it rotates seen from below clockwise. Now it's going this way, and I'm going to redo the experiment, changing the direction of rotation, and then it will go the other way around.
Right. But the interesting part is that momentum that you've got going there is resisting, you know, the resistance. So you don't need as much. You didn't need two supports in this case. You only needed the one if you've got enough momentum going. And so I found that super interesting. Anybody have any thoughts on that particular aspect of the course or of the lecture last night? Nope. Okay, cool. That was just something that stood out to me. I thought it was super fascinating. I mean, I had never seen it, heard it put that way, but momentum and daily action is actually become something, a bit of a, you know, an important thought process for me, because a lot of times I've started and stopped in so many endeavors, and just realizing that, you know, the momentum, getting that momentum going and keeping it going and keeping the force of your momentum moving in one specific direction is going to resist all the other evils that you've got going on in your life, whether that's in between your ears or whether that's in your environment. Getting that momentum moving is a force for keeping you going. All right, just a couple other things. This is just some random stuff. I'm just trying to break things up here a little bit. This was a song called Blame Thrower, which was a term that was used last night by Richard, which I thought was kind of cool. And this was one of the gifts that was shared in the chat.
Responsibilities, we all have a social debt. And if there is a man free of guilt, I haven't met him yet. So now you're back to your corner, you're under verbal attack. They're pointing fingers like guns in your face, and nobody got your back. You got to beg somebody for all your make of mistakes, so someone else will pay for all the factors that you make. And you should take responsibility for what you do, but you just point your finger at somebody and I stand and say, no, I don't feel so good. No, I don't feel so good.
All right, cool. All right, so let's jump ahead to the last section here. Of lecture takeaways, and we'll finish up on this slide here. So I just got a few a few slides here that we can bring in. There was some, this was you know, right at the beginning of class, we talked a little bit about learning new skills and how we can do that, unlike what we've learned, you know, from maybe Malcolm Gladwell and his book, The Tipping Point, I believe it was that the right one? Where he talks about you can, it takes 10,000 hours to learn something. Josh Kaufman has a different thesis, his antithesis to the thesis of Malcolm Gladwell being 10,000. He says you can learn what you need to learn in 28 hours. Anybody have any thoughts on that particular topic?
Has he tried golf?
Has he tried golf?
That's a little bit difficult. Yeah, so to get good at stuff, it's a really interesting one, that the point of focus is to be able to commit that 20 hours of solid practice. And it probably comes back to that Pythagorean cup and keeping the balance right, maintaining a focus, but not overdoing it, you know, because then you'll start to sweat the technique and everything will go well. That perfect practice driving perfection. So, but for us, in doing what we've done so far within the lectures, the lesson for us will be actually, you can make these great leaps and bounds just by doing something and practicing for 20 hours. And if you can make it enjoyable, even better. But those skills are still going to be learned pretty rapidly.
Yeah. That's right. And we're all having this experience, especially with the interview portion. And I'm really interested to see what happens with this additional exercise here, integration exercise with the arguments. All right, cool. So here's another slide from the lecture, 2 questions to win. I like acronyms. So WIN being the acronym for 1, what's important now, and 2, what's important next. So any thoughts on this particular slide? What did you guys think, or what came to mind when you were contemplating this last night?
I think it's for me, it's just about, what's important now. So it's about focusing on what you need to do now to figure out what to accomplish, or figure out what's important now, so you know what to do next, and then figure out what's important next. I mean, it's kind of like a back-to-back thing. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's like
they go together.
Right, they go together, but I'm saying like it's because like we have so much information coming in from all over the place, that we have so many things that we want to do. Yeah, or at least for me, that's my thing. Yeah, I got so many different things going on. So it's about like figuring out what's the most important now to get what's next done, right? I mean, so it's about like chipping away little by little, and like kind of figuring out what's not so important, what can wait. Kind of like what Richard said. I mean, like make a list, figure out what you can do now to accomplish your goals that's next in line, instead of like just having everything there. It's it kind of goes back to the first week too with getting things done. It's about making room for the next thing. So you got to figure out and focus on what's important now. But when we have so much in life on a day-to-day basis, you really have to stop to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like kind of like what Mike was talking about the mental models. I mean, this is a smorgasbord. This class was really a smorgasbord of different mental models, ways of keeping yourself on track, and sometimes just having a couple of questions at hand, just memorizing a little acronym like this to win. You just need these 2 questions. Just get, what am I needing to do now today? Remember that. What's important next? So
can I, and let me just add, I mean, this exactly, this is so simple. Look at this one slide. How many meetings have you been in where so much time was wasted because people didn't get down to what was important now? And then at the end of the meeting, they didn't confirm with each other, all right, what are we doing next? And it was a complete waste of time. And it almost seems obvious when you look at it. It's so simple, but it's super effective and not used nearly as often as it should be. And that's why I said I love last night's lecture.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Dave.
No, go ahead. It just is ridiculously simple. And this is what I loved about this slide. I can remember this forever. To win, hadn't thought of it before, but it's just a tool that you now have in your tool chest. And I used to poo-poo little cliche, what I would call this cliche in the past, but now I realize this is really a pretty powerful tool if you can just remember it. Okay, go ahead, DJ.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, just like having a meeting or something for like a task or a project or something, like if you structure that meeting prior to going into it, like what your agenda is going to be and like what you're going to accomplish and what you plan to take out of it at the end, you have that structure in place when you go into the meeting, and then when you close out your meeting, like still like what Mike was saying, you make sure you accomplish your goals of what you had going into it, right? So that's what's important now, right? So like that's your focal point. But in my job, I have a job that I got to go to meetings all the time, that it'll be like called like a sales meeting, right? And it's not like it's all it is like a rundown of what's going on. There's nothing accomplished, nothing whatsoever. I mean, all it is about, yeah, this guy sold this, or we're changing this process or procedure, but no, it doesn't register with anybody. Like nobody takes it in. Half of them, I mean, especially now because we're not actually sitting in a room because of the COVID and stuff, like half of it's all on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams and stuff like that. So most of them, ain't even paying attention because it's just, it's crazy like how often that really happens in my business. And like when I have meetings in my job, like I always put an outline together, and make sure that I cover every little single thing. And then that before I close it out, I go around the room and make sure everybody knows exactly what the meeting was about and what the next step is coming out of the meeting. I think that's hugely important, but now but in this concept, it's like applying that to your life, right? So that's a completely different challenge, but
now
And Dave, I agree with you, right? It seems almost what you say, cliche. It's common sense. There's a lot of common sense and cliche ideas out there, and yet people don't do them. And so it's hard to knock it until you don't see a critical mass of people actually following good, simple, almost obvious practices. And that's why, it's good to have, and kind of like what you're saying is that it's not very useful though if people don't use it. But I agree, it is tempting to look at some of these things as cliche, but I have to remind myself at least, well, unless I've got these integrated into my daily practice, then I need to stop laughing at it and start practicing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Go ahead.
I feel like cliche is like a word like conspiracy theorist, right? I mean, like they call you a conspiracy theorist just so that anytime you talk about a topic that comes close to that, it's just brushed off as like ridiculous or silly. Well, cliche can be considered the same thing. I mean, some of these things people call cliche, and then it kind of chalks up. You're like, oh, well, that's so cliche. But when you really look at it and dig down and drill it down, some of those cliche things are some of the most important things you can do, or they can utilize or apply to your life. So it's all about perspective.
Yeah, it's a way of, I don't know what.
How are you?
Who are we hearing here?
Somebody might be off mute.
Yeah, I can't tell.
Well, common sense is another one, right? You could call some of this common sense because when you look at it, it seems obvious and it makes sense, but it's probably not common sense if it's not practiced in a common way, right?
Yeah, this is.
Somebody better check their mic.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute. I'm trying to see if there's a button to mute all here for a second, and then everybody can unmute themselves as needed. But I'm having a hard time finding it. But anyway, yeah. So this is definitely
live.
Doing it live. So this is one of those things, that super simple, like Mike's saying, like TJ's saying, and yet if you just apply it, this is what I'm learning from taking a course like this and being involved in things like this.
Sure.
It's really the momentum, it's the action of doing these things on a consistent basis.
We are lucky.
Man, I am trying to mute guys. I apologize. I don't see any mute.
I think Lucas has got Richard's phone.
Just talk over him. It's all right. You can talk over him.
Like,
All right.
I think it's Richard.
All right, we just got a couple more slides.
Yeah,
and then we'll be
I'm
done.
gonna have some ham, get a drink.
Yeah, it's definitely Richard.
Is it Richard? Yeah, I see. I don't have Richard on here. I don't see him on here.
Yeah, so Dave, I wanted to add something to that.
Please do.
Common
Jump in.
sense practice. Yeah, so recently we got two new coworkers, and
who noticed?
We just started. Who is that?
Who wrote the book?
Yes.
Okay, I think I got it. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, we recently at the start of the week we just got two new employees at our company, and my immediate superior and I, we were talking after our first meeting because there was no agenda set, and there was a little bit of confusion about how and what we were talking about and how we could proceed afterwards. And so we started to set up new meetings, and we tried to acclimatize them to always include an agenda in the meeting invitation. So just to get the new employees just right into this habit. And yeah, because this makes so many things easier, because all of us have so many meetings every day, and you want to get your stuff together, you want to be prepared. And if you then have to search for stuff, and yeah, so the meeting has no meaning in the end, because you just look for stuff, nobody knows what's going on. And even defining what's the meeting about in the title. So you have really descriptive titles for your meetings. That should be a common sense too. So that's what I took from the interviews too. So because it was autonomy exercises, integration exercise, so this is a simple thing, but still you have it in your calendar and you prepare yourself accordingly. And yeah, I had so far 15 interviews up until now. And
kicking my butt.
even even before we had the exercise, I had 3, and yeah. So for me, it was very important because of my English. I wanted to practice a bit more, and getting these interview skills done down in a different language, because in German it's okay. I know what I'm doing, but in English it's another language. You have to think differently. Yeah, so it was very important.
That's the extent of my German. Sorry, Dominic, I had to use it on you. Das ist sehr gut.
Yeah, das ist sehr gut. Genau.
Das ist sehr gut. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So a couple more slides and then we'll end the show today. I just wanted to touch on this one because this was another one that these two really. So there's this one and this one. Failure is the raw material you need to construct long-lasting success. And then failure, collect, analyze, failure, feedback on failure, organize and improve. You must process it to transform that liability into an asset for your success. So this idea of failure as a raw material, that was another thing that really resonated with me. In thinking of terms that, you have to have this raw material. Right? If you don't have it, you can't create the product that you want as a result of that, right? So you need the failure. And then it's not just having the raw material. You can't just have lumber. You can't live in lumber, right? You got to have a house. So you got to have that lumber, and then you got to go through the process of refining it until you have a product that you can use. And I had just never thought of failure in those terms. That was a very aha moment for me. And I wanted this will be like our last question for everybody. So just give me your thoughts on, failure as raw material. What did you think? And what are some ideas that you got on that?
I start out.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's everybody doing?
Doing great.
Great. Hey, Danny.
Great. Well, I'll be the first one to speak on this. During my journey of doing what I'm doing is, I've come across a lot of failures, and my mindset toward it was, okay, well, this happened. I can't take it away. But I learned, and I knew kind of beforehand, okay, what do I learn from this? And how do I process it and gain an understanding so I don't do it again? Especially for aquaponics, there's a lot of ways you could do things wrong. And there's a lot of disinformation out there. So what do I weed out? What do I know? Okay, well, that didn't work, or this supposed failure I went through. How do I process it? How do I transmute it into something better? And things are changing because I had those failures happen, and I didn't let stop me from moving forward. So you got to learn through failure. Things are going to happen, and I've made my share of them. So thankfully, I worked my way through it.
You've got a really good attitude about it. You got to have that raw material in order to make something out of it. It's one of the things that I get hung up on, honestly. I like to think that I'm good at handling failure. I don't think I really have been, honestly. And this is why this has been really enlightening, in particular for me, was to understand that, to think of it in those terms. And again, it's just another one of those mental models or hooks that Mike was talking about. Just thinking of failure as a raw material. If you have that idea in your head, and you're like, I need to get that. I need to get that raw material. Then you're like searching for it. So, okay, I got to go fail at something now, right?
Well, because failure is it's feedback, just like a win is feedback at base, right? There are two forms of feedback. And so it's not fun to fail. It can be painful, but at the very least, you're getting information. And if it's not catastrophic failure, then it's very useful. The more you act, the more you get feedback. That's good or that's bad. I wouldn't want a map that only told me about the good parts of an area, but was kind of silent on the bad parts. And so it is, as a raw material, as data, as information, it can be just as useful as success, but it's not fun.
Yeah. Well said.
I think also one big thing with failure too is like once you overcome the fear of failure, right? Once you understand and conceptualize like that failure is okay and that it is raw material to your success or to your progression forward, then you take the fear out of it, right? And then that empowers you to take risks, right? And that's really a huge thing, a huge factor for me and the steps that I've taken in the past is like, once you understand that, like if you do this, like, and you fail, it's okay. You know what I mean? It's just part of it. Then you're not so standoffish about doing it, because I know in like, like obviously I'm not perfect, but like years and years ago, like I would not take big leaps and bounds and risks and stuff because I was afraid of failure. But once you get past that and you start and you have some successes from your failures, and it takes that risk or that fear out of it, and then you're more apt to take risks. And once you're more apt to take risks, that's when you start finding like amazing things and opportunities.
It could even, and I'm too fraidy cat sometimes to take small steps, small actions, right? Just the fact that it's a failure. If I look at it as a negative thing as such, and even if the actual failure isn't really that damaging in my life, it's something where it's an embarrassment or I look stupid. Looking at it as something that is bad on a personal level can hold me back from taking simple actions, doing simple things. So sometimes the only risk is the idea that I'm afraid of how I will appear afterward. Like I messed up, I did something wrong, I gave the wrong answer. And that can be paralyzing to a lot of people where they don't do anything unless they know for sure they're not gonna have any kind of mess up.
Yeah, so
Mike,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
yeah,
please.
it reminds me on taking on tasks, because in the past I was procrastinating a lot because of that, because I was afraid of failing, because I knew that the task was difficult, and sometimes it wasn't even that difficult because I didn't educate myself about the difficulty level of the task itself. So I was afraid of starting, because then I would feel overwhelmed, or I had the fear of feeling overwhelmed when I actually start the task. So if I didn't have the right organization, and I would feel overwhelmed because of all of that, because then you have to plan, and when you start planning, then it might become frustrating, because then you have to start just think actually, and then make it real. It gets more and more real, and then the fear of failing because you have planned wrong or something like that, it's increasing. So I put off many tasks, and in the end, just before I had to finish that task and hand it in, or had the meeting just the night before, I did an all-nighter, and then I had to do it. I just plowed through it, but it wasn't that good as it could have been if I had started earlier, if I didn't have that fear, and if I didn't have the hesitation to start educating myself and taking that educated risk in that yeah. So I totally
Although I will say, Dominic, that a lot of us only do well at things right if they only do it at the last minute. I'll say that I basically put together this podcast this morning because I have to have the pressure there in order to get it done. I mean, that's some of us are that way, but I think you're 100% correct. If you can allot yourself the extra time to do stuff, you can, sort some things out, right? Get it polished and a little bit better.
Oh, another point. You go ahead.
Yeah, and to be honest, I have an exam in just 2 weeks, and I have to remind myself that I actually planned a bit, and I need to stick to the plan, because if it's getting out of hand again with the fear of starting or the putting off of doing that task, it might become overwhelming. It might turn out to be an extremely difficult task in the end, because I don't have the time anymore. So this is something that I currently face. So because I'm a bit afraid of that exam, but I can't keep that. I can't let that keep me away.
This is going to be you've taken this a few times before, right?
Yeah, 3 times already, and I failed. So I know where I failed.
I'm going to jump in here for a second just before you guys close out, because I just want to say that I'm terrified of that integration exercise. Just want to tell you, I have extreme anxiety about it.
They're not going to take away your birthday. It's going to be okay. They won't take away your birthday. It'll be fine.
What do you mean by that exactly?
I mean, all I'm saying is that it'll be okay, because you're with a group of people who understand exactly how you're feeling, and this is the place to experiment and to try it out, and not to. Yes, I understand you can't get rid of the anxiety, but it's going to be okay anyway to put yourself out there. because we're all friends here, and we're not going to put it on YouTube. So,
tell you what, Joanna, let's do an interview. Let's do an interview before you do your argument. Let's talk about it.
It's okay. I'm sure I'll be better, just because I jumped out and told you guys, because I was so horrified.
Needed to get it off your chest. No, I get it.
Yeah. So I'm jumping back.
And
Thanks.
you can even do it in your natural, in your own language, you know?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Not like you, unfortunately. But you could do it with what's his name? Ludger. Yeah, and with Dennis. Exactly.
If I could,
yeah, go ahead.
If I could add to what Johanna said, one of the many intriguing things that came up in my interview with her was we had kind of come up with almost a joke of a idea for like an adaptation of Richard's quote on scheduling success, but we were thinking of a book called Scheduling Our Failure, and I think that could be a pretty interesting.
I like the title. That's awesome.
I think that what do you think, Joanna?
I'll buy a copy for sure. All right, guys. Well, I think that pretty much does it for this week's episode of the Do It Live Autonomy podcast. So join us next week. But first, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And if you want to get to know and get autonomy for yourself, go to this website, this URL right here on the screen, getautonomy.info. And please tell them that Dave sent you, and I appreciate it. Thanks, guys, for being here. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Great show, Dave. Good job, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job putting all that stuff together last minute, too, from last night's lecture.
Thank you. All right.